Hello and welcome everyone to our session today. My name's Greg Brown and I'm the Head of Product Management for Onshape here at PTC. I'm delighted to be joined today by a great group of people representing a customer and also a key partner of Onshape. And there's nothing better than an interesting story, and our aim today is to have Mark, Kyle and Chris provide that story. So let's kick it off with Mark Frost. Mark, it's over to you.
Hello everyone, I'm Mark Frost with Amazon Web Services. I work in our industry team, connecting innovative solution providers like Onshape to AWS's cloud infrastructure. So for those less familiar, AWS is a world-leading cloud platform powering millions of customers with over 200 services, from basic computing and storage to cutting-edge Gen AI and machine learning. So as someone who's spent 3 decades in the CAD industry, I'm genuinely excited to share with you today the transformative collaboration between AWS and Onshape. What we're seeing here represents a true paradigm shift. Onshape has established itself as a pioneer in cloud-native product development, offering professional-grade CAD capabilities and integrated data management that's revolutionizing how teams collaborate. And by leveraging AWS's global infrastructure, Onshape delivers a unique platform that eliminates traditional IT burdens while enabling real-time collaboration. The recent launch of Onshape's AI Advisor, powered by our Amazon Bedrock, exemplifies the innovative potential of our partnership. This AI-driven assistant helps teams optimize their design processes and accelerates product development. The combination of Onshape's expertise in CAD and PDM, coupled with AWS's global infrastructure and advanced AI capabilities, is creating new possibilities while maintaining the highest standards for security and performance. Great to be here. Back to you, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And I'm looking forward to digging into some more of that. So these next guys, I have met a number of times, Chris and Kyle from Custom Truck. I've privileged to be on their site, see their work, and have had them visit us at headquarters even recently. So Chris, Kyle, great to have you here, and let's hear your story.
Awesome, thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. Like Greg said, I'm Kyle, and this is Chris. We're with Custom Truck OneSource. We're going to take you through a little bit of an introduction to Custom Truck, tell you a little bit about who we are as a company, and then after that, Chris is going to give you a demo of some things that we've been able to do in Onshape that have really kind of catapulted us into the next level as far as our CAD environment goes. So with that, if you want to start the slideshow, we'll start with the introductions. Okay, so yeah, like I said, my name's Kyle Gerber. I'm a professional engineer. Currently, I'm the Vice President of Engineering for Custom Truck OneSource. That means that I have responsibility for most of the engineering that goes on at Custom Truck through all our different divisions. What's next? So some of the companies that I've worked for in the past I started my career with Terex and worked there for a few years and then went to Versalift. After that, I worked for Sany for a while, which was a fantastic experience. I had the ability to work overseas for a little while, which was great. And then I left the construction equipment industry for a short time and started working for a startup company called Realm 5 in the agricultural space. And then in 2018, got the call to come work for Custom Truck, and it's been a fantastic experience. So that's kind of my career journey. Most of my career has been spent designing things like you see here on the crane. I have a lot of experience developing telescopic boom systems like the one you see here. Yeah, that's kind of where I've spent my career.
All right, so my name's Chris Beougher. I'm also a mechanical engineer. I am currently the engineering systems manager here at Custom Truck OneSource. I have been in a little more diversified product realm, everything from wastewater down to tiny semiconductors and electrical meter sockets, and now here at Custom Truck OneSource. So from fractions of a millimeter up to 80-ton cranes. It's been an adventure. I started, like I said, as a designer and got into design automation with DriveWorks and SolidWorks. That's kind of my first intro into the system side and how can we tie these systems together and build upon rules and drive designs to have consistency, better manufacturability, all of those things that go into a day-to-day task of a designer or engineer. And then I took that and helped with the implementation of SOLIDWORKS PDM at the time. Really enjoyed it, and since then have kind of continued down that system side and stuck with the workflows, processes, systems, and here we are. Got into management to kind of help build those best practices, grow engineers, and continue to drive for standardization across industry.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Custom Truck and who we are as a company. Custom Truck is a family business. It was started by Fred Ross, who you just saw there on the screen a minute ago. And at the beginning of our, I guess, establishment, we were an upfitter, and that means that we would take a piece of equipment and buy a piece of equipment, buy a truck, mount the two, and then we would sell that to the end user. As far as the company history goes, I'm not going to go through all of this in detail, but just a little snapshot. You can kind of break our history down into kind of 3 stages. You know, started in '96 and then to 2016. You could kind of say that was laying the foundation of the company. As I said, a lot of upfitting, just a lot of customization of trucks. And then in 2015, the company part of the company was purchased by Blackstone, which is a private equity group, and that kind of started what you could say as a little bit of the acquisition period of Custom Truck. And then a couple of notable points in this time period. 2015 is when we began starting to engineer our own products, and then in 2019 we actually purchased the North American crane division from Terex, which was kind of the kickoff or the diving board point for our full-on, I guess you could say, delve into becoming an OEM of equipment and engineering. And then the third stage begins in 2021 when we became public. We merged with Nesco. Nesco was a company that had a very large rental fleet. So now when you merge the two of us, we currently have the largest rental fleet of construction equipment of anybody in the nation. So that's kind of where we're at right now. By the numbers, and this slide is a little bit old, but we're about a $2 billion company. We've got somewhere in the low 40s as far as strategic locations across the country, over 1 million feet of manufacturing space, close to 400 technical experts as far as people that can go service equipment. Like I said, over 10,000 units in our rental fleet, and then we do have a 24/7 call center and have the ability to get anywhere in the United States to service a piece of equipment in less than 2 hours. As far as the culture of Custom Truck goes, this is one of the reasons why I actually joined the company. I really wanted to work for a place where I felt like if I worked hard, then that work would be recognized and rewarded. So, you know, things like, you know, scrappy, intense, very ferocious. We love winning, but also very loyal, generous, transparent, authentic. And, you know, as we grow, you know, like I said, we're a very large company. As we grow, the struggle is to kind of maintain this culture and the idea or the kind of the attitude of a family business. Okay, so history of engineering. Like I said, we started engineering here at Custom Truck in 2015. Before that, you know, previously or solely upfit. Some of our first projects were pretty rough. You could call them disasters. So, you know, the roofing conveyor, like you see in the upper right there, the one you see there is actually a fiberglass roofing conveyor, and it works fantastic. What we started with was an aluminum roofing conveyor, and it cracked. It had lots of problems, and it was not a good start. The next one that we tried to do was called the C-Track. You can see it there in the middle of your screen. It worked great, but the tracks kept falling off. So again, rough start. And then the third one is a rail car mover. We actually developed 2 of these, but there was a little bit of a disconnect between the sales specifications and what we designed, and the customers ended up not liking it, not wanting it. So that was a bunch of inventory and a bunch of money and engineering resources that was kind of down the drain. So anyway, needless to say, we found that it was very difficult to kind of jump into engineering, and there was a little bit of a lack of understanding between the organization and engineering on exactly what it took to produce our own products and become an OEM. But we persevered, and now we have over over 40 engineers that work for us, and we've developed lots of really good products for the company and for the industry. Okay, keep going.
Yep, sorry.
No problem. Okay, that takes us to kind of where we're at right now. Why Onshape? So previously, and actually currently we still use SolidWorks, but we're transitioning away from SolidWorks into Onshape. And I guess I'll just say that I'll just start with that. You know, I'm not a hater of SolidWorks. Chris is not a hater of SolidWorks. Can you click the next? We have thousands of hours of experience in SolidWorks. When I started with Terex, I kind of pioneered the CAD selection team at Terex, and we recommended SolidWorks that the company should choose to go with. They rejected that recommendation, and I actually left the company because of it. So I founded the SolidWorks user group when we lived in Atlanta, and like I said, so this isn't coming from a place of somebody that doesn't like SolidWorks. So I used it for almost my entire career. However, in the past several years, SolidWorks has been very clear about their direction that they're pushing the business. They're clearly pushing people toward the 3D experience. They've had price increases for the desktop application, and they're extending maintenance contracts to 2+ years and making it more difficult. So, you know, their direction for the business is clear. And from our evaluation and from what we've talked to people in the industry, 3D experience is not ready. And I don't believe that that's a very you know, controversial statement. That has came from their own VARs. So anyway, those are some of the reasons. And as far as performance goes, we were experiencing some very slow performance from SolidWorks in the PDM vault. It was just taking our engineering department and kind of grinding it to a halt, especially on some of the larger assemblies. And so the efficiency of our engineers were just becoming very, very low. So that was part of it. And I guess at the end of the day, it was less about CAD to CAD, feature to feature comparison, and more about data release management, some of the foundations on which the CAD system is built. So so anyway, that's just a really brief overview of why we started transitioning over from SolidWorks to Onshape.
All right. And with that, I'm going to jump into Onshape here and kind of take a look at some of the things that we're doing. Don't know how many people have been in the CAD.onshape.com, but this bad boy is highlighted on there. And yeah, pretty excited to have that out there and see some of our product and what we're working on kind of highlighted for the users and industry. So what we're attempting to do here is take a base model and drive, whether it's a 3 different models of crossover, a 50, 60, or 80 ton crane. So we have a bunch of configurations in here on what's your wheelbase. Is it a single or twin steer? How many axles do you have? The spacing between them. Do you have a single or dual exhaust? Like I said, what's the crane? Does it have any or a 50, 60, etc. axle spacing? How many counterweights are on the deck? So where'd you go? So we'll just say, hey, we actually have 3 of these, and let that drive for a second. So this is going and rebuilding the background data and saying, oh, I need to suppress, unsuppress, remodel some things based on these parameters. I'm not going to drive a whole lot of dimensions because it can take some time, especially on Wi-Fi here. But just the ability to be able to have these configurations in a full-blown chassis and crane model is really the driving force here. So we would have, in the past, a customer would say, hey, we want a 50-ton crane with a pusher axle or tag axle, which is this guy here. So no pusher, 1, 2, etc. We can add those in on the fly, be able to drive the actual model. Oh, my default didn't save there. So say 180 inches there. And you can see it was actually set at 1 inch, so it's actually way up here. But it's adding that in there. We have some interference. That's the nice thing about this is you're not just in Excel. You can actually see, okay, we have some interference here. and be able to drive some of those design parameters and say, okay, we need this to be 160 and drive that design. These can go up and down. One of the nice things that kind of drives more towards the design automation and being able to limit what's out there and what's being done is the ease of configurations in Onshape. Being able to come in and say, all right, that particular, got to scroll down here, we have a lot. That particular pusher of axle 2, I accidentally didn't have the the defaults on. Oh, and I have my branch locked. That's why it's not letting me. But you can right click and say set defaults and be able to drive that with mins and maxes, which is really nice. So with that, the other piece that really kind of drove us down this path is not having to put in that request with our product engineering team that would then put the data into Excel, run some calculations, go back to the customer and say, hey, we have some issues because of bridge requirements. We're going to need to add a pusher axle or a tag axle, and going back and forth. Each one of those can take, a week, 2 weeks, depending on our workload. So here we have, these are some real numbers from a scale that we have, where it will it would tell us the weights on the front axle, rear axle, and then we can specify pusher axles and calculate. And this does take a second to load, but thinking about what it's doing here, it's going through and looking at the center of gravity of all of these things that we just selected. Where do these axles live? Where is this boom at? Does it have a jib on it? This guy here. How many counterweights are on the deck? How many counterweights are back here? And it's calculating all of those weights, center of gravities, and what the effective weights are on the front axle, rear axle, etc. So, it took, 30 seconds there, but we have a total weight of roughly 95,000 pounds, 61% on the rear and 40% on the front. This is actually looking pretty good from being able to drive on a bridge, excuse me. So if we wanted to say, okay, let's try and reduce cost and go down to one pusher axle, that's pretty easy now. And we can say, okay, let's move that, kind of center it a little bit. That's 200 inches. And then we can come in and, jumping way over there for some reason. 15,860, 11,020, and we'll say that's 5,000 because we only have one this time. Calculate. And again, it's going through and re-looking at those numbers based on, okay, we've changed the parameters here. So there's now only one pusher axle, and going through, looking at, okay, where does that live? Recalculating all these centers of gravity and taking that and crunching the numbers in the background. And just for reference, trying to create one of these, open one of these in SolidWorks, and it would be, it could be 45 minutes to open one of these sub-assemblies, let alone an entire chassis model. That was a huge limitation for us, is not being able to build these upper levels, which is why we built it into Excel, and a configurator outside of SolidWorks is trying to get the boom assembly mounted on a chassis assembly with a tag axle and all of those things. It was just so intensive on our PCs that we just simply couldn't do it. So this has kind of taken us to that next level of being able to grab and drive our design parameters of wheelbase, single steer, twin steer, all of these different things are driving into this model and down into sub-assemblies in the bed and different things, which is pretty exciting. Being able to do that in any other CAD system, I've never seen that possible. And I've been in a few. We're able to not only look at it in the retracted, I might regret doing this live here, but to to me, this is one of the biggest things of Onshape that's just phenomenal, is being able to look at motion and how things are interacting with each other in the real model and not having to set up motion studies and all of those things. So we're able to grab this, rotate it up, bring our boom out. Oop. Persistent selection still gets me sometimes. Come on, baby. There we go. Yeah, bring our boom up, out and drive. Okay, here's where this would be in this particular instance, which is pretty cool. Not something we've been able to do in the past. We've had our retracted and extended features of our boom assemblies and our cranes before, to be able to kind of see, what does that look like if it's fully extended, if it's fully retracted. And we could do that before, but being able to do it dynamically on the fly and with all of the graphics that are happening right now, it's pretty cool that we're able to extend this guy in, 10 seconds it takes it to think. That's just unheard of in industry, from what I've seen. So those are some of the main things that we're driving right now. We definitely have some what's next, taking this and driving it into actual sales layout drawings and being able to say, okay, here's your dimensions from your effective backup cab to the start of your crane. Here's the overall wheelbase and the loads, driving those into notes of here's what it would look like for you driving on a bridge or whatever the case may be. So being able to dynamically do that, hit a button and say, all right, now we need a drawing. That's kind of what's next. We're starting down that path, and being able to put this in our sales team's hands without having to have a separate design configurator to build in these rules of, all right, here's our mins and maxes and some of the one of the newer features that we've had to add back in here recently is the visibility conditions that are now on configuration. So tag axle, you can see, okay, now I can see that there's 400 inches to that tag axle, turn it off. And we have one pusher axle. Well, I want two. Now there's going to be two distances to pusher axle. And it's rebuilding the model with each of these with the data for what should those dimensions be, adding it over here into our axle load program, which is written on the back end, and communicating with Onshape, which is been phenomenal to see.
Chris, I had a quick question.
Yeah.
And someone from the audience has a question too, but I'll ask both. That configuration you've got there, have you bothered to try and calculate how many lines of Excel that you would have needed to create all the combinations and permutations there?
Oh gosh.
No, that was on my to-do list. I mean, we could do the factorial of single steer versus twin steer and axle count and those different things. The hard part is, how do you quantify my wheelbase? Are we saying 1/4 inch increments or 6 inch increments? So that wheelbase can grow. I think I have it set right now to be 300 to 450. So there's 150 permutations if you're doing 1 inch increments. So it's going to grow substantially.
Yeah. The other question was how many parts or instances are in that assembly that we're looking at right now?
That is a good question. Another nice thing here, we can look at that very easily in Onshape. So other tabs, we have 125, 122 unique part studios, assemblies, drawings. Unfortunate, and maybe you can answer this, Greg, but right here in the pop out, I'm not sure that there's actually a how many instances of parts are in here. I think it's only unique part studios. I know I can get it on the back end, but yeah, you can easily see how many part studios, assemblies, drawings, etc. But how many, right there, total instances, about 4,000. There we go.
All right, thanks.
I was gonna say,
that's a good number. It's a pretty good number in there. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a simplified model, right? We don't have absolutely everything in here, and that's kind of one of the things that we're trying to quantify and going through the testing right now is, if we're off by 1% of what we see from our scales, is that due to fuel tanks, or is that due to different drivers in the truck, right? I mean, all those things, not that it's a large portion, but a 100-pound driver versus a 400-pound driver can skew your results. So, and were those drivers the same when it was weighed just chassis versus chassis with crane mounted? So there's a lot of variables that go into that, and we're trying to look at the excuse me, quantify the data of what are we getting here versus Excel versus actual scale tickets. And that's we're in that validation process now. And I'd say roughly so far we're seeing about a 1% variation.
I think from a technical standpoint, it's awesome, but from a managerial standpoint, we have a guy, or at least we have an engineer that all he does is basically just scale tickets and layout drawings for sales. And so if we can take this model and give it into the hands of our sales team, and they can sit with the customer and run through this and do 4 or 5 iterations, then that is the work of at least one engineer. And maybe our engineer doesn't stop doing layouts, but maybe it's the really tricky ones, Michigan in the middle of the frost breakup period, we need it really, really specific, then we can help. But we're hoping that we can give this to our sales team and reduce our engineering load for making these layout drawings, by a significant amount.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's one that they talked about a lot when you start going through any design configurator, automation trainings, different things like that. You're never going to be able to capture 100% of the options, right? I mean, there's always going to be that customer that says, well, I know you use this winch, but I really want this one from Japan. And that's part of our business model. We say yes, and we'll do it.
Right.
But that's not what's built into our configurator that we're using 99% of the time and using this particular winch. So those times where we have those instances, yes, it may be possible to bring those in and drop them in, because this does go through and look at what's actually in the model and calculates those weights and centers of gravity and all that stuff. But is it worth it for the 5% to try and do it in the big model, or is it worth it just to still do some by hand for those one-off instances?
And Chris kind of glossed over it, but I think it's really important to know here that this is really a what you see is what you get. One of the biggest problems that we've had in the past is that we would do these layout drawings in 2D in AutoCAD, and then we would have an Excel calculator that would go through and do the weights. And if the engineer that was working on it forgot to update the AutoCAD to match his Excel calculations, then you would never know, right? Maybe he forgot to show that he moved the pusher or the tag 10 inches. And so, there was an inherent disconnect there. With this, like I said, what you see on the model is exactly what's being calculated as far as the axle load. So there is almost no chance of getting a calculation that's incorrect, because you can see it right in front of your eyes. So what you see, it's calculating that's what you're getting as far as the axle loads.
And that's a huge point, because we kind of saw a minute ago where I added a second pusher axle. In the past, we haven't always had as much detail in the layout drawing. So the fenders were interfering, but we couldn't see that in AutoCAD because we didn't have fenders in there. So our layout drawing looked like it would work with those 2 pusher axles, but it actually didn't when we went to go build that. So being able to build in some of that validation and visual validation is also a huge thing. So yeah, it's very exciting to be able to look at this live and actual data of here's the model, here's the actual chassis we're getting from the manufacturer, and the outriggers we use, and all of those things. We're looking at the real thing, not a draft side or AutoCAD variation.
Right. All right. Well, I think that's getting to the point of what we have for the demo. Greg, did you want to go over and do some Q&A?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got lots of questions already, and you've triggered me a few things. I've got a bunch of questions. So at the very, very high level, moving from one CAD system to the next is a challenge all the time, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
what was, and especially, the learning curve, CAD isn't CAD, right? There's a learning curve to go from
Yeah.
one to the next. I've done it myself. You've done it, as you said. So what was it like for Custom Truck?
Well, I think there's kind of two separate answers to that question. One is the technical side, and then one is the personnel side, and maybe the personnel side is the one that kind of gets overlooked the most. But we discussed this a little bit more last week during the MDA in Boston. But I have found that maybe the more difficult portion of the transition was the personnel side, because engineers love their CAD systems, and that they're just so tied to them. It's part of kind of who we are as our being, and so you have to recognize that and kind of understand where people are coming from when they have their resistance to change. Everybody's resistant to change, right? We get comfortable. We know what we know, so recognizing that and understanding that, over communicating, helping people work through their questions about, I've been doing this for 20 years and now you're throwing this, this new CAD system at me, and I may not be as effective as an engineer or as a designer. You just work through those things. So I think it's really important as a manager to have a good understanding of the way the new CAD package is going to work, and be able to understand a lot of those questions, and be able to kind of answer on a personal level. Personnel side is one thing, but then, technically there's lots of questions about legacy data and data translation and all that sort of stuff. And so, I don't know how deep you want to get into it, but those are all things that we've had to kind of consider.
Yeah, I mean, I know there are ways of doing different things differently in Onshape than legacy systems, and some of that's due to the platform. And I think you actually mentioned a word which probably flew by quickly on people's watching the last bit, and you said something about, my branch is locked. Right? So a branch being locked isn't the sort of vocabulary or vernacular from traditional CAD systems, which are file based, right? So do you want to just quickly dig into that, because that's probably one of the more obvious differentiators at the beginning for people coming straight into Onshape, saying there's no save button. How do we lock this? How do we check it out?
Absolutely.
I guess
Is it possible to share my screen again?
Oh,
there we go. All right. So I have open here, and this is a very basic tree because it's been one engineer, and we kind of go in and look at it occasionally. But you can see it went from November until yesterday, until it had a version, which I don't love. But that's one of the nice things of Onshape, is I can literally see every click that's happened between November and yesterday. So if we need to go back, and that's what I did when I did this branch, is I went back and said, okay, here's where I want to change a little bit of how the configurations were done. I selected it and said, okay, branch from here. So a branch is basically a way for us to be able to, I like to think of it from the NPD standpoint and say, we can look at, we have a problem for the customer. Here's 2, 3, 4 different ways that we could solve this, right? So I want to look at a branch of, we need to make it lighter. We need to remove material. We need to change material, or optimize the design, reduce parts, all of those things. So you can have a branch for each of those, and you can work on them independently. And then when you decide, hey, I like this piece of one and that piece of another and that piece of another, you can then come in and say, I want to merge into current workspace. And then it looks at, okay, we have these changes from each. What do you want to keep from branch one, and what do you want to keep from main? So you can see Amit this morning is working on some of the comments that I made last night of, hey, I think we need to change. I think we need to change the way we have. The jib was one thing. So he's making changes based on my comments last night, but I didn't want anything to go wrong for the demo this morning. So I made a branch and I said, here's what I've already changed, and we'll go over that. And then I locked it, so he couldn't make those changes in my branch. So, I mean, you can think of it from the traditional CAD sense of I'm checking it out. It's mine. The check in, keep checked out is what a lot of engineers would do for the, I want to make sure somebody's not working in my area. So a lot of companies will use that main branch of keeping that protected, and then changes will happen in branches. And if and when you want to release those, you bring those into the branch, or merge those back into main rather, sorry. And then you can drive your changes that way.
Yeah, so I mean, this sounds a lot like software, doesn't it? And I guess that's a representative of the age that we have grown up in for Onshape. We're not coming from from the older traditional ways of doing things,
Right.
And we could spend the entire webinar talking about that. We get such a unique thing for Onshape to be able to do, and I think you guys are using it in an exemplary fashion. But trying to move along onto some other things, you did show a very interesting analysis of the weights and measures there. In general, it's a very flexible environment to do custom features and other API-powered applications. What's your take on that so far as well? And has that really fundamentally changed the way that you've worked with Onshape?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that we've really enjoyed, is being able to get in there and say, hey, this particular hole isn't available. Well, that's okay. I'm just going to copy the feature script from a counterbore and a countersink, and I'm going to combine them. And we have a custom feature that looks exactly like the whole feature from Onshape, because I can see the actual Onshape features and how they're written in feature script. So we took your guys' code and have the exact same interface when we're doing a combo hole. And that's very, very unique to Onshape for sure.
And so the weights and measures was actually a web application running somewhere. And I guess this is a small little shout out that I can make to Mark as well.
Yeah.
Because, where Onshape runs on Amazon Web Services as a platform, we use AWS as a platform as a service. And if you want to build more web applications that interact with Onshape, or if there are other pre-built applications, you've got to run them somewhere, haven't you?
Yeah,
and Mark, maybe you can comment on that one.
Yeah, what I'd say is, AWS has an incredibly deep set of tools to develop on top of the cloud platform, Kubernetes, containers, a bunch of security tools to make sure that anything that you build is, the best and most modern cloud platform that's extensible and has the ability to, update and all those good cloud modern best practices.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mark. And actually, there's a lot of interest in the comment threads around that custom application. It was something you developed in-house. I know that. I can answer that. And
with some help from you. So thank you, Greg.
Yeah, no problem. That's what we're all here for, right? And absolutely, you talked a little bit about custom features, which are in the context and the scope of the part studio, is where you're building geometry. But beyond that, Onshape does have a comprehensive API, which you can get into other areas in assemblies and builds of materials and the PDM aspects as well. So to answer the question, yes, that was the reason it was done in the API rather than just as a custom feature.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, the key takeaway of that is the configurations in Onshape have allowed us to do things that it literally is impossible in SolidWorks. Like, I don't know the number as far as the number of permutations, but it's basically infinite. But the way the configurations are structured in Onshape, it allows you to have, user inputs, and you can have your different lists of configurations, and each of them are independent. And so it just wasn't possible in SolidWorks. So the configurations is really what allowed that tool to happen, and then building the custom application on top of it kind of took it to the next level. So yeah, I mean, but the point is, not possible otherwise.
Absolutely. So yeah, moving on, we've got a bunch of other feature-based things that you've sort of touched on. One of them would have been the collaboration and PDM aspects of Onshape, because as I always like to say, it's Onshape isn't CAD plus PDM, it is CAD and PDM all the time, right? They're not bolted onto each other. How's that affected your adoption of Onshape?
Yeah, definitely. So that's been a learning curve. A lot of times previously we would try and work around the system instead of in the system. It was just easier to take things, do a pack and go, do it on our desktop, unfortunately, and then try and bring them in. And wait, we have duplicate parts here. Yeah, it was a mess. Trying to having one source of truth for everything and having an item-centric philosophy has been a game changer for us, and being able to go in and say, hey, I'll get questions regularly. How do I model this? Or I can't seem to do this helix or whatever it is. And I can say, okay, share the document, and I can follow them while they're on the screen and watch their clicks and picks, and be able to say, oh, well, you need to add a mate connector over here, and then you'll be able to drive that. So that's been kind of piggybacking back to one of the earlier questions, the buttonology of Onshape, and hey, this can't be done in Onshape. There are some things, yes, but 95% of the things we can. It's how are we doing it, right? Thinking of it from the Onshape philosophy and doing the in-context references and the driving the design. The top-down modeling has been it's been a dirty word in SOLIDWORKS for a long time. Always break those references because they're going to break eventually. So being able to drive things in context of each other is phenomenal.
Yeah, so I mean, you talk about single source of truth, and I take it that Custom Truck One Source was actually named before the single source of truth comment that you came up with there, but it's very apt. But moving on to a different word, which in the early days perhaps was also one that was questionable for people. It's the cloud, right? So when you want to put everything in the cloud, does that worry you? Does that make you feel happy, secure? And I guess at the early days of things, people were quite suspicious of the cloud. So how has that sort of played out in the adoption at Custom Truck?
I mean, I guess I can talk about it from a security standpoint. Certainly, I had concerns from a security standpoint. Our executive team, my boss, and and our all the way up to our CEO had concerns about it. And but I guess we talked a little bit about it. But what makes me rest assured is that if Amazon can't get the security right, like, what do we think we're going to do as Custom Truck? Like, we're not security experts.
Yeah.
We got Mark here. Maybe Mark can go into a little bit about the depth of the security. But like, there's nobody in the world that's going to be able to keep our information more secure than Amazon. If Amazon can't, then nobody can. So like that kind of helped us, at ease a little bit. So go ahead.
Just to piggyback on that just for a second. One of the things that I thought was very interesting was we had some questions from the executive leadership, from CEO and others. But then when we went to the IT team and said, hey, we want to go to this cloud platform that's hosted on AWS, where I butt heads with them hourly on other things, they said, yep, done, do it, please. That speaks volumes on the IT and security side, where they were all in and excited to get to that because they know we're going to be more secure.
Yeah, let me add that, at AWS, we actually consider job number one to be security, because absolutely, as you're saying, there is no one out there who's going to trust the cloud unless it's secure. And in fact, I remember working with one silicon chip manufacturer who wouldn't put their projects into the cloud based on IP. And once we talked about how FedRAMP certification is built in, SOC 2 compliance, all of these things are built in, there is no better place to put your data. Your data is much safer in AWS than it is on your premises. And so we have, AWS has a GovCloud. We provide these technologies in a compartmentalized way to the government, the highest level of government, most secure types of government agencies. So if that technology is powering the federal government, it can handle what you need to do on your side.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, that's great. We do have the Onshape government instance of Onshape now running on GovCloud, which is a very important thing for us as well. So we've touched on a lot of features, especially configurations, collaborations, PDM, all sorts of things like that. What about the impact that's had from a sort of financial or an ROI standpoint? I know in the case study that was written up, you talked about $500,000 worth of cost savings. Can we talk on to that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're looking at as far as the cost savings, and I will say, just in full transparency, we're working toward that. But the cost savings are everywhere from, I think that we're going to end up being more efficient in modeling. We're probably about the same right now, as we kind of work through the user base. But this applications like we showed here are going to help us be more efficient. The hardware side is another side where eventually, as we move away from SolidWorks, we're going to be able to get away with not buying the $5,000 mobile workstations that we're currently working on. All the computing power is being done in the cloud, so that's gonna help us. And I think where we're probably going to see most of the cost savings is in the efficiency of our change process. We're still working through this right now, but the workflows in the current PDM, we've done our best to make them streamlined, but we just seem to struggle with them. So I'm really looking forward to getting things transitioned over into Onshape, because I believe that the change process and performing ECRs, ECOs, those kind of things is going to be more streamlined and efficient. So, yeah, I absolutely believe that we're going to achieve that savings, and we're working our way there.
No, thanks, Scott. So just as a sort of wrap up this section on the what you showed, what about some advice to others? I mean, you're into the migration process. The migration does take, quite a lot of time. There are different ways of approaching it. So what suggestions would you have, or advice, based on what you've experienced so far?
Yeah, definitely. So my biggest advice would be communication.
Yeah.
Making sure that not only the engineering team knows, but obviously our data impacts everybody in the business, right? So whether it's a shop floor, whether it's procurement, whether it's supply chain, or any of the above, quality team, making sure they know what's coming, how the transition is going to happen. There's definitely a lot of different methods out there when it comes to migrating data versus remodeling data versus what's that cutoff point? Are you doing changes if they're small still in SolidWorks? Are you bringing over quote unquote dumb solids, importing them and doing a direct editing, move face, delete face, all of those things, which those tools are phenomenal in Onshape. And a lot of people actually prefer to just bring it in and do that. It's sometimes easier, but you do lose that design intent and a lot of the capabilities of what Onshape has to offer. So my advice is, as much as you can for things that are going to be changing and driving change in the future, I like remodeling and having the features done and remodeled in a Onshape methodology, and utilizing part studios and top-down modeling and those different things that we touched on a little bit here. When you bring in dumb solids and you import everything, just do a data dump from your old system, whether it's Team Center or SolidWorks PDM, whatever it is, you're getting one part in one part studio, and so you're not leveraging Onshape for what it is. So the driving the change, I would recommend doing as much as you can in-house. I know a lot of people will farm it out and let a third party kind of churn through that stuff, but it also you lose some of the a training opportunity for people to get used to Onshape. You lose some of the visibility of, I can't count how many things that we start remodeling and we get in there and we start assembling. It's like, wait a second, how have we been building this for 5 years? That interferes there. So the workarounds that are happening on the shop floor, and well, it's easier for us just to grind this out than try and put in a change request and all those things. It's really been nice to get the data remodeled and from our engineers into Onshape. And I think as we get more and more data into there and released onto the shop floor and have them looking at live data, being able to, easily comment and make those change requests of, hey, you're calling for a 4-inch bolt here. It needs to be 4.5 inch. We don't have enough thread engagement, whatever it is. A lot of times in the past, it would just be, I can just go grab a 4.5 inch bolt and I don't have to take the time to put in a change order and all of those things. It's a whole lot faster for me to do that.
Yeah.
But I don't want you doing that for the next 2 years.
Yeah. I'll just add one more really quick thing to that. To me, the most important thing when you start talking about a CAD transition is an idea of plotting. If this is anything, it is a marathon. It is not a sprint. So, you're not going to be able to do your implementation in 30 days or 60 days, or maybe even 12 months, depending on the size of your organization. But you have to get started. And if you do a little bit of work each and every day, then, and you have your whole department help you, then you're going to look back in a month or 6 months, and you're going to say, wow, we did a lot of work here, and whether that's training, whether that's redrawing or whatever it is, if you just keep plotting, then you'll get there.
Yeah, Kyle, I mean, I know you guys brought that up last week when I saw you, this idea of the migration is really a training opportunity, and you really need to grab that and for all it's worth, because otherwise you are just wasting those opportunities. And the plotting, the repetition, the forced, sitting yourself down, whether you're learning a new language or transitioning a CAD system, that always has proven to work.
Right.
So, and I guess the same thing, there's some questions here. We'll just move into some of the audience questions, and some of them are coming in about best practices. So there's very many different ways of doing things in Onshape and SolidWorks and other things. And one of them is around documents versus files. So with a document, how do you decide what goes into a document versus splitting it into two? And so do you have a comment on that? Because I can probably answer it if you...
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Chris will probably have a technical comment. My comment would only be, when you get started, sit down with your team and be like, and just say, okay, guys, like, let's talk about how do we want to structure this? Like, we had literal conversations, intentional conversations about, okay, here's our product. We all know the parts. What does it make sense? What goes in this document? What goes in this document? This should be in a part studio because these are geometrically related. And so it's not a trivial thing. Just sit down and try to make a good decision and make sure everybody is on the same page. And then we would actually make, kind of a hierarchy of, these are the documents, I guess I should start even above that. These are the projects, these are the folders, these are the documents, and then these are the part studios. So map it out. That's what we did.
Yeah. That's a great point. The term document, I think, kind of gets lost a lot because you think of a file with a document. The document is a housing container. Some think of it as a project, but I tend to have multiple documents in a project. And I saw a comment there of, as you're doing design and you realize, oh, I probably should have done this over here. What can you do to move those things? And we do that regularly. We're remodeling something and we do a bunch of stuff, modeling it in context. And then we realize, oh, this is a filter that might be used on 20 different cranes, right?
Right.
This filter housing, this should be in a library.
Yes,
so
right.
We're going to take this that we modeled over here in this part studio, and we're going to move to document and put that in our library so that we're driving that design reuse and not the let's pull a new part number next time to make something the exact same size. So design reuse is something that we're trying to get better about as we bring stuff into Onshape. So being able to build those libraries and things on the fly and move things after you model it here, bring it over here, it really helps a lot.
Right.
So there's a follow-on, and it's a really simple question, is that if you've got separate documents, can you merge them?
Yes.
Yes. So it's a really simple question. I mean, it's a really simple answer, and the answer is yes. And so, just to reflect on that, you can start with a document, you can split it into multiple documents. At some point in the future, you might decide to bring that back into this document. It's very, very flexible. And in fact, when I started using Onshape back in 2019, when I joined the Onshape group, when PTC acquired Onshape, really coined the phrase in my mind of fearless CAD, because you could be fearless about the way you approach changes. And knowing that if you need to change something down the track, it doesn't matter that you've gone down in a certain avenue, because you can always change it later. And what I was, the way that I'd done things in the past, you would have to make some very important decisions up front, and you were kind of stuck with them. And with Onshape, it's a lot more flexible.
Yeah. Right.
So the next question's around collaboration. How has Onshape changed the way your team collaborates internally and with external partners?
Good question. Well, we don't do stuff on the local PCs anymore, which is nice. we ran into a bunch of trouble. Design it on the local machine because it was faster, and then do an upload to the vault, and then go back and change things on the local machine, and then try to re-upload. And it was like, well, now what? Now I've got a bunch of stuff that was there, and so we don't do that anymore. So that's good.
Yeah, and the ability to be in a hardware that isn't available in standard content is one that I go to regularly. We'll get comments in that particular document that we have that's a library, and they'll say, hey, at Chris, assign it to me. We need this particular fastener, and send me a screenshot or part number from McMaster or whatever it is. And I'm able to go in, have a dashboard, for lack of a better term, but here's my tasks that are assigned to me, and say, okay, I need to update my library to include this, and then it's available for everybody. So it's very easy to go in and comment on something. Hey, we're missing this feature, or we're missing this particular part, or this is missing a part number, etc. You can at somebody in those comments on a document, assign them a task, and it notifies me on my phone, on my email, on my anywhere that I want it to, and lets me know, hey, you have something to do.
Yeah. One more thing I'll add is that I've always had this idea that we should be able, so when you make a new design, and then maybe you give the model to someone and they make a print for you, you should be able to go in, we're in the digital age, you should be able to go in with an iPad or with some sort of a tablet and mark that up and save it, and then they should be able to see it. Well, we tried that in SolidWorks. We ran into a bunch of issues. It basically wasn't possible, but we're finally able. We're there with Onshape running natively on iPads. I got some of our key designers' iPads, and they're able to go in with their pencils and make a markup and take a screenshot and put it in a comment, and then that comment goes directly to the person that was making the drawing, and they can update it. So finally, we were able to start doing manual markups, like red lines of drawings, digitally, and all that information gets saved. So
great.
That's been great.
Yeah, I mean, that's the power of the platform that we built on, that we started from scratch, and to enable those sorts of things. So two quick ones to finish with, and it's not going to be necessarily a quick answer, but we'll try and make it that way. So how are you doing version control in PDM now versus before?
Ooh,
yes, the quick answer to that one is
so
10 seconds or less.
As we are migrating data into Onshape, we're still in the infancy phases of a lot of the remodeling stuff. So right now I have a report that I run daily and say, hey, what was released Delta from yesterday? And then I go look at PDM, and I go and put those in a obsolete type state of Onshape managed. And everybody can still see those files. They can still reference those files if they need to. But if there's a revision that needs to happen on that particular part, assembly, drawing, whatever it is, it has to be done in Onshape. So our revision control, as things are getting migrated and remastered for a term, I guess, as they become available in Onshape and get released, then they become unavailable to make any changes in SolidWorks rather, with that method.
Yeah.
Okay, final one. It's around training again, because a lot of people here have been looking at, asking questions around the transition from SolidWorks to Onshape. About how long did it take someone typically to make a transition, to be productive? And was there sort of specific trainings that you put people through?
Yeah, I mean, we did the boot camp, which was great. It was great, and I don't know, training is great. And you should do training, but I feel like learning a new CAD software is like learning a language. It's learning a new language. You're not going to learn Spanish by going to, your Spanish 1 class. You do learn it. Spanish, that is good, but you learn it by practicing. So, yes, fantastic training from Onshape. The training that's available, through the training module is fantastic. All of the guys did it, and it was very, very helpful. But they didn't really start to, ingest it and internalize it until they just did it.
Yeah.
So
how does it apply to me?
Yeah, how does it apply to me? So I mean,
I highly recommend the boot camp and the top-down modeling. Because that gives you the multi-part studios and the kind of, to me, the basis of why Onshape is what it is. Being able to do those things in context and drive these changes between this part and that part based on changing one dimension. So those are two that I highly recommend. And then it's going to be industry specific, right? If you have a lot of sheet metal in your industry, they have a great sheet metal learning path. And, you know, there's a ton of stuff out there on the learn.onshape.com. Highly recommend using it. There's some great stuff in there.
And as far as the time, it depends on what you mean by the time. You can get in and you can start using Onshape and you'll be doing stuff in hours. Like you know, if you're an expert in SolidWorks, how long is it going to take you to become an expert in Onshape? You know, it kind of depends on your definition, but a month maybe, and you'll be pretty well up to speed, I guess, has kind of been our experience.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. You know, and it's a loaded question, but you know, the point is that you know you can get up to speed pretty quickly. You know, the overheads of getting the right hardware and licenses, and you know, learn.onshape.com is a fantastic resource, as you said. So yeah, it's a smooth sailing there. So Mark, thanks for coming here, and Kyle and Chris, thanks for the great conversation as well. It's been really interesting. We appreciate you as a customer. We're happy to work with you as a partner. You obviously we communicate a lot, and Mark, AWS is obviously a key platform for Onshape. You know, we use AWS as platform as a service, and a lot of people forget about the as a service bit when they talk about SaaS. It's really, really important to us to provide a robust, rock solid, scalable service of Onshape. Last year we did 99.95% availability, which is only a testament to the robustness of the AWS platform. So thank you for that. Looking forward to continuing that in the future, and thank you everyone for listening to our webinar today. It's been a great fun, and hope we can do it again soon.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for inviting us, Greg.
Thanks all.
Appreciate it.
Thank you guys. It's been an honor.
Yep.